Good morning, everyone. You're most welcome to today's episode of the Market Snapshot. My name is Nobert Kiiza, and I'm the education partner for FX Pesa here in Kampala. And I'll be taking you through today's snapshot. So today our focus is going to be the anticipated NVIDIA earnings, as well as also the upcoming FOMC meeting minutes that are expected to be released sometime later today. That's going to be at about 10:30. So just to start off with NVIDIA, essentially with what we've been observing is that it has had such a strong rally. Just yesterday, NVIDIA um, was actually down about for about 5%, and I believe this is likely because traders and again some investors are cutting back on their long positions that they had from the start of the year. And one of the reasons why the Nasdaq has been under intense upside momentum over the course of the past 3-4 months since we had the last dip, that was around the time that the war in Israel, the war against Israel and Hamas had reached its peak. That's the time that we saw that there was actually a strong move up higher. Yeah, so essentially, when you come and look at the targets for some of the different brokerages and again some of the different banks, most of them are actually putting big weights on NVIDIA. As you can see, you have one firm called Loop Capital that is looking at a target price of about $1,200. Looking also at UBS and Goldman Sachs, they're also looking at the NVIDIA price, moving as high as 800 and even as high as $850. So again, this is going to be the major focus today. And again, traders are waiting to see what happens from those earnings. If we get likely strong earnings, we might see a surge on the Nasdaq and potentially even a surge, on some of the other assets as well. But we have to wait and see how that plays out. Amazon released its earnings, and I know that the impact of that was where we saw Nasdaq crossing over to 8,000 points. And again, now I think the major focus and of course, the major event that we're waiting for now is for the NVIDIA earnings, because I think, again, it's the last the last and final big earnings release that we are going to get before we cross towards the end of Q1 2024. So the other thing again that has also been on the radar, on the market radar, and also again the focus for today is the expected FOMC minutes. We had a recent FOMC a meeting. I think that was on the 31st of January. And what we got from that meeting was that the Federal Reserve had actually indicated that they are not looking at hiking soon. And again, the data that we've been getting also has also helped to cut back on that rate cut narrative, because the FOMC has been indicating that they do not want to make some of the mistakes they made in the 1980s when they cut too early. Okay, because of course when they cut too early, it usually then means that they will have to now deal with a resurgence of inflation, which they do not want. So they want the inflation well anchored so that they can, proceed and get normalized policy. So now, when we look at the current probability of rate hikes or rate cuts, we are seeing that there's a 91.5% chance that the Federal Reserve is actually going to do hold rates. Actually, is going to hold rates. There's a 91.5% chance that they're going to hold rates, and this is because the commentary that we have been getting from several of the Fed speakers is that they could look for the first cut somewhere around May. So this also, I think, underpins the strength that we are seeing with the DXY. By far and large, I think that's the reason why we are seeing a much stronger dollar. And I believe also you guys must have seen what's been happening with the dollar. And again, even with the data that we've been seeing, CPI came in much higher. We had NFP coming out. It was a blowout report of about 381,000 jobs. Caused a real big sell on gold, as also on GU and EU and all these other different currencies. So today's FOMC minutes are going to be released sometime closer to the close of trading in the US session, and of course that's going to be towards 10:30. So they're coming out at 10 p.m. And the traders today will be looking to hear from the Federal Reserve, and of course, essentially take take notes and really look at the notes that were discussed during that particular those particular meetings that they had. So it was a 2-day meeting. There were 2-day meetings, and we're going to wait and see essentially whether we can get some guidance on when they could look at cutting back. So if the FOMC minutes indicate to us that we are going to see a potential cut most likely in May or towards maybe June this year, I'm thinking we should see a much stronger dollar, and we should then see the indices then continuing their sell-off. Now, seeing also that we have NVIDIA earnings that are going to be coming out after the close of the bell, I'm thinking that we are going to potentially see a much weaker Dow, as well as also a NASDAQ. That is if traders are cutting back on their trading positions. Now, before we cross over to the MT5, I just want to have a look at the chart for NVIDIA. I want to have a look at the chart for NVIDIA, which again is going to indicate to us essentially how it's doing. So you can see right here that the NVIDIA price has actually been performing quite strongly. We had a sharp sell yesterday where we saw it plummeting to about $681 a share. And I'm thinking there's going to be some relative weakness. We are already way high. If you look at the 6-month chart, you'll see that we are seated at a peak closer to the levels that were at in 2021. And I'm thinking this is going to indicate, this is likely to show to us that there's potential for some bit of a sell there. So that's what we have for NVIDIA. If you have any questions, you can just type them in. If you have any questions regarding the FOMC minutes and what you think has been an issue, and again something that we should be focusing on, then you can let me know, and I can definitely help to handle that question for you. So let's cross over to the MT5 so that we can see what's essentially happening on the charts. We are going to start with the Dow Jones, and then from the Dow Jones, we can then be able to cross over to other things from there. Yeah, so right now, this is what we are having with the Dow Jones. I think as you can see clearly, we are having a bit of a downtrend, which again happened when we peaked. So we peaked 2 times. We peaked around here, which was at a level of 38,904. And again, immediately after that, we saw that there was actually a sharp sell. This sell is what we had from the CPI. So PPI again also weakened the Dow. That was sometime on Thursday last week. And immediately when we tested that level, we saw that there was actually a sharp sell there. So right now we are in some kind of a descending wedge in the Dow. And I'm thinking that we need to observe to see essentially how the price moves around that area there. Should we potentially see a sell potentially back to the bottom point of this wedge, and I'm thinking price is going to resume downtrend, and we could potentially retest this level here that we saw of 38,196. Now, today traders are also going to be focusing on FOMC minutes. If the FOMC minutes again reinforce that kind of dovish stance from the Federal Reserve, then it's going to provide a lot of downside momentum for this particular currency, for this particular index, and we should see a sell possibly to the bottom part of that wedge. So keep in mind that the Dow is up over 6,000 points and much closer to peak levels. So seasonality usually tells us that between March to April is when we normally see stock markets pulling back. So we are still far away from April, and we could potentially see at least some bit of ranging within this area before we see a now much stronger pullback that can potentially take us to much lower levels. But for now, we need to just keep observing how the price action happens within that area. Now, look at the NASDAQ. You'll notice that the NASDAQ essentially right now has created a nice top here, and this top changed into some kind of lower high, and which, of course, it peaked around 18,000. So the price action for NASDAQ is essentially telling us that I think it's now due for a pullback. Should we get strong NVIDIA earnings, it's likely that NASDAQ will reinforce and start moving higher. But for now, I'm thinking there's still potentially some kind of downtrend that is likely for the Nasdaq. And if we get weaker earnings today, which is very unlikely for Nvidia, seeing that they have been having steadily very strong earnings, and it's likely that the earnings today most likely will be strong. So we have to just keep monitoring it here. I just want to shade this line here so that you can see how it actually played out around this area here. So you see that we actually were able to break this area sometime yesterday. So we are now in some kind of a downtrend, okay? And should we see traders still cut back on their shares of NVIDIA, and again also break this key level of structure, which is somewhere around here, then we could potentially see the Nasdaq having a pullback that can potentially then take it below this level here. But for now, I think we are going to stay range bound above that 17,400 level and potentially below that level of 17,600. So crossing over to GPP-JPY. So GPP-JPY right now is having a fundamental move, guys. This move is a fundamental move. If you look on your H1 time frame, you'll notice that GPP-JPY was actually able to break above a very nice descending wedge that was formed between the time of 18th January all the way to about 9th Feb. Immediately we broke out of that descending wedge. We've been on a very strong uptrend, and of course, even right now, we are still stuck in some kind of an uptrend. Okay, we had a nice liquidity sweep that was formed on Friday, around 15th of February. That was somewhere around here. Again, reinforcing very strong demand on this particular asset, and it's likely that we should potentially see much higher levels. So my kind of approach for today regarding GPP-JPY would be looking for or waiting for a pullback on it or a retracement, and again aiming for us to take a trade to the upside and potentially visiting this level of 18,000 of 189.990. Fundamentally, keep in mind that GPP-JPY is also on an uptrend simply because the GDP data that we got from Japan recently was indicating that Japan is still going through some kind of a slowdown. Historically, also keep in mind that Japan, over the past 20 years, still did not recover from their economic crisis they had in about 1985. So it's still unlikely that the Bank of Japan is going to rush to move from negative rates. Again, with a very weak GDP, it's usually unlikely that central banks don't tend to hike rates when they have economic slowdowns. They instead actually look at cutting rates. So if you are a trader and you're looking at GPP-JPY, I've seen a lot of traders thinking and maybe GPP-JPY should be poised maybe for a pullback, maybe back to 185, 1840. Very unlikely, guys. This thing is on a very strong surge to the upside, and we should potentially see it moving closer to the upside. Now, crossing over to gold. Gold was in a very nice asymmetrical triangle that it was able to break on the day that we had the CPI, and you can see that gold was able to break below that level of 2028 and again go all the way to 1986. However, if you notice gold's price action, it's actually having some kind of a reversal move that has taken it back to where it was before the CPI. But I'm thinking that we still have an FVG that we have not yet filled. And again, this is somewhere around 1973, between 1973 to 1980. Keep in mind also that this level here as well is a level that gold has not failed, has not yet been able to breach. Okay, so much as gold is moving higher, it is looking for a key area that it's going to have a sweep to the downside. So at the moment, I'm looking at potential shorts on gold that can potentially take us back to this level that we are at, somewhere down here. So the other key thing today to note is that we also have the FOMC minutes. So if we get FOMC minutes indicating and reinforcing that dovish stance from the Fed, then it's going to pressure gold to the downside, and we should potentially see a retest of this 50-day moving average. If we manage to break below the 50-day moving average, then it will again add to bearish momentum, and we could potentially see gold selling much lower. Keep typing your questions and I'll come back to them in a moment. Immediately I'm through, I'll be able to handle those questions. So now crossing over to Euro USD. Euro USD has been on a downtrend. Yesterday we were actually able to break above that 50-day, rather that 50% fib level, and again much as we breached it, we have barely been able to break above that 38.2 fib level, which again is a key level that where we had a lower high for Euro USD, which is still reinforcing that downtrend. Now, you also notice that Euro USD again has been presenting a lot of bearish momentum, especially when the CPI comes out. The CPI that we have been getting, the one we got from the US, as well as also the NFP, pressured Euro USD to the downside. So I should potentially expect that we are going to get a retest of the market below that 50% fib level and potentially back to that level of 61.8. If we manage to break back into that descending wedge, then it's likely that the bearish momentum will continue for Euro USD, and we could potentially see it breaking below this key level of that 61.8 fib level. If we break below that, then we might see a retest of levels that we saw close to November. On the fundamental end, ECB is having its next conference in April, and again, when we get that conference happening in April is when we'll get further guidance from the central bank on what the policy direction is going to be. However, in their most recent meeting they had in January, they indicated that they were going to look at cutting rates as early as April. So should we see indications of rate cuts, and again much slower, rather much weaker data, economic data, then I'm thinking we should potentially see a much weakened Euro USD. To the upside, we have to keep observing how it performs along this level here. Should we see a breach of that 38.2 fib level, then I'm thinking it's going to be likely that we could see Euro USD trending higher and potentially reversing these losses that it had from the NFP of 2nd of February. Now, looking at the fear index, right now has been trending higher, and usually, like I usually tell students in my classes, that VIX or the fear index usually tends to trend higher simply because traders hedge around this time. When there's no risk event, traders make an imaginary risk event. Okay, that's essentially how the world of trading is, simply because you cannot be so sure when the risk event will show up. Okay, so we've been seeing a surge in VIX calls, and we are seeing that again with the reason why VIX is moving higher, even when we have not been seeing any sort of like news or anything showing us that there's some kind of resurgence of those war fears. So should we see an increase in VIX? I'm thinking this then should support a stronger dollar and potentially also weaken gold and the other risk on assets. So crossing over to GPP USD. GPP USD right now is stuck in some kind of trend to the downside. We have seen it with those week-based order blocks that have been appearing quite significantly. We saw one here, and again we saw one around here, and we have also seen that the buy that we had for Euro USD, rather for GBPUSD to the upside, was not sustained. We are also seeing that we are seeing a number of bearish flags. The bearish flags are quite many. I think you can observe them from here as well as also here, and we also had one forming around here. Okay, so I'm thinking today, being the FOMC minutes, we should see some weakening for the euro, for GBPUSD, at least back to the bottom part of this level here. Should it manage to retest this level, then it could potentially bounce off and then start selling. But for now, we can just keep observing to see how the price action performs around there. Keep in mind also that the UK entered a technical recession 2 months ago. There is a difference between a technical recession and a recession, guys. A technical recession is textbook recession, where we say when we have 2 quarters of contracting GDP, it normally means that the country has entered a technical recession. Okay, so again, looking at the employment data as well as inflation data from the UK, it's too strong. Only that, of course, there has been a kind of reduction in the inflation, but for us to get those recession fears really supporting a downside move for GBP, I think it potentially has a lot to do with how the inflation data pans out as well as employment data. Yeah, so much as you have 2 contracting GDPs calling it a technical recession, you might not see that reflect so much in the price of the currency, okay, especially when the other sectors are doing okay. Now, we are going to quickly look at NVIDIA before I cross over and handle your questions. So this is how the NVIDIA stock has been doing. NVIDIA was actually at a high of close to $850. That was in 2021. But you can see that yesterday we're actually able to break to break below. We're now trading at around 694. So I'm thinking if we get weak earnings for NVIDIA, we are most likely going to trade closer to the 50% fib level. That is around the price of 468. Again, this is likely unlikely because I don't think people are going to take profit yet. So I'm thinking for now, NVIDIA, if we get any pullback from the earnings, it's most likely going to be within this area here. Okay. Yeah, that's what I'm expecting for NVIDIA. So let me cross over to the questions and see if you guys have any questions that you need me to potentially answer. Great. So, hi Martinez, how are you doing? I hope you're having an amazing time. Hello, Charles. You're saying what can we trade in forex using NVIDIA? So NVIDIA, if NVIDIA, you focus on the Nasdaq, okay? So Nasdaq is the one that gets affected by NVIDIA. So Dow Jones, yes, no, Dow Jones doesn't get affected by it because NVIDIA is not in the Dow Jones index, but it's usually in the Nasdaq as well as also it's in the Nasdaq as well as also the S&P 500. Okay, it's a big component in those two indices. And should we get weak earnings from NVIDIA, or not really weak earnings, but when we look at earnings report, we focus on the earnings plus also the forward guidance. The forward guidance is how they are going to perform in the next quarter. So if in the next quarter, they indicate to us that they are likely potentially going to see some maybe weak growth, potentially maybe a few hiccups or a few risks from regulators or from any of this, then I'm thinking that will affect NASDAQ. So for the earnings, we usually focus on the NASDAQ, okay? Yeah, so let's see if we have any other questions here. Faith, you're saying, hey, could you look at NZJPY? So NZJPY, it's also been on an uptrend. It's been performing fairly strongly. I think, again, all the JPY pairs have been on a strong upside. And again, the reason for this is majorly because of the weak JPY, as well as also the guidance from the Bank of Japan that has been that they might they are not likely to move away from their negative rates. Okay, So most of the JPY pairs, again, even NZJPY, have been performing fairly bullish for quite some time, as you'll be able to see here, and it has a lot to do. It's a fundamental move, guys. The move is majorly fundamental. Again, we are seeing that weakness there. Okay? I think the only way we are going to likely see a stronger, we are most like the only way we are likely to see a stronger JPY is if we get what we call stealth interventions. Okay, a stealth intervention is when a central bank intervenes because they want to stabilize the value of the currency. Remember that stronger Japanese yen is not good for importers. Okay, it hurts importers. Again, it makes it harder for even foreigners. Rather, it makes it harder for dealers in Japan to be able to import things because they will need more JPY. Okay, so it's essentially not usually good for the currency. So this is what we're having with NZJPY. We are in a steady uptrend there, as you can see. And if you look on the other side of the chart, you can see actually we have breached levels that we've not been at for some time, essentially showing you that this is in a steady uptrend. Okay, if you go on the higher time frames like the daily, you'll be able to see that we're actually at record levels. Okay, so now someone had asked about yes, Faith. So for Faith, what I can advise you is when you're trading NZJPY, you would want to focus on retracements. Okay, you focus on retracements. As you can see within this uptrend, we've been having levels where we could have essentially bought price. Okay, so levels around there where we see a bounce off that ascending channel all the way from February, we've been ascending. Okay, as you can see as well that we had a bullish flag that appeared here. So this is a bullish flag, and it appeared around the levels of 91 to about 90, broke out of that bullish flag and resumed uptrend. Okay, as you can see clearly there. So I think this one here is still poised for an upside move, but you need to wait for a retracement, potentially maybe closer to that ascending line, and then add in your position to move higher. But we are in a strong uptrend there. So let's see if we have other questions here. GBP I've handled that. Bill Jeb, you're saying, is there a significant chance that FOMC minutes report may contradict the previous Fed sentiment in cutting rates earlier than June going forward? Really, really good question there. I think that question is a really spot on one. Again, the purpose of the minutes is really to minutes as you know them is we have to look out for what the key points of discussions were by the FOMC members, the key points of discussion. So yes, we had the conference like we had in January, and we were just getting really comments per se, but not really something particular that we can count as cast in stone. Okay, and the minutes do that because the minutes document just a document, a written document that will tell us what was actually discussed. So essentially, I don't think there's going to be any contradiction. I think what we are going to see is that the FOMC members are going to indicate that they want to trade carefully, or they essentially want to focus on incoming data, just like they've been the same guidance they've been giving from the previous meetings, where they will be focusing more on incoming data. Though again, I think the minutes are also going to be lagged. They're not going to show us what the FOMC members currently think, because from the time we had the last Fed conference, we had CPI data, we had NFP data, and I think if during that time when they had the conference, they were still anticipating maybe inflation to keep on a downtrend trajectory, it's not been on a downtrend. As you can see, just dipped on headline from 3.4 to 3.1%. So I think that resurgence in inflation is going to be an issue for them. Yeah. So I think from the Fed conference that we had and also from the FOMC minutes, I think that it's still going to be the same guidance that you're going to get from them, that they are not rushing, that they want to trade carefully and see how the data evolves before they decide. Yeah. So USD card, someone is asking me to look at USD card. So let me just quickly go there, just a moment. Yesterday, we had the Canadian CPI, which disappointed to the downside, and we had a very sharp move higher on USD card, I think closer to 1.35. So I think it's still holding on to its gains today. Let's just get that quickly and see. Just a moment. Just look for it here. USD card. I don't know where it is. Why am I not seeing it? It's somewhere here. Okay. Yeah. So we broke. We had a very sharp move to the upside, following the yeah. This was a move high we had from the card CPI, and it was because of that weak Canada CPI data. Okay. That's what caused that sharp move higher. So yeah, this big blue candle you're seeing is actually because of that data, this candle here. Okay. Yeah, so we should hold those gains. I think we're most likely going to hold those gains, and potentially see potentially see a move higher there. Okay. So DXY again has also been under downside pressure. Keep that in mind, guys. So if we fail to break above that descending line there, then I'm thinking we are going to break below and potentially test this level that we saw 7 days ago. Okay. Yeah, so for now, I think there's still a buy bias here to the upside. Uh, again, because of that weak data that we had from Canada. But weak if we get a weak DXY again from the FOMC minutes, or a stronger one, then we should see a break either above or below those levels. Yeah, so just keep an eye and look at and wait for a break of any of those levels to decide on how you can. And keep an eye on DXY, guys. Keep an eye on DXY. If you know you're trading USD card, you should always keep an eye on DXY. Yeah, so gold, I think I've handled that. USD JPY. So all the JPY pairs, same thing, guys. They are all on an upside move. I think USD JPY should be looking at breaking 150 yen soon. Is Europe in a recession, and is Europe in recession, and what are the impacts? So Europe again, guys, is in not okay. I wouldn't say, when you say Europe, hey, Europe generalizes. I cannot tell because those are so many countries that are in Europe. But I know that Germany was in a technical recession sometime last year. Uh, right now, I think they were able to register a positive GDP for the previous quarter, but there is still some kind of slow or a bit of contraction on the economy in Europe, okay, generally. And I think that's the reason why the ECB wants to move closer to the rate cuts, because they need to reaccelerate the economy a bit. And that is also one of the reasons why the Euro USD has been on that downtrend, okay, because of that weakening data. And we should potentially see again within oncoming data, but for now, that weak data is going to really affect the euro, and we should see it staying lower. Now, keep in mind, guys, that despite us expecting rate cuts, I know with traders, if you expect rate cuts, you expect a weaker dollar. The reason why the dollar is actually strong on one end could do with the expected rate cuts from the US, but rather not the expected rate cuts, but the pause on that narrative for the rate cuts. But also the data from the US is much stronger. US's GDP, the last quarter they had, their GDP was 2.9%. UK's GDP for the previous quarter had contracted to negative 0.1. Japan's GDP again also contracted. Europe's GDP also barely above 1%. Yeah, so that's all supporting a strong dollar, guys. Yeah? So keep that in mind. Yeah. So let's get back to the questions. How should we trade double time frame? Should you look at bigger time frames and enters? Yes. Prayet, you trade using the smaller time frames. You trade using the smaller time frames. The reason why you'd want to look at the bigger time frames is to get a bias on the market. Okay. You get the bias on the market, and then you cross over to you cross over to the lower time frames to look for entry and exit points. Okay, awesome. Please look at yeah, NVIDIA is closed because the US market opens at 5:30, Charles. Okay, opens at 5:30 East Africa time. That's the reason why the stock is not moving at the moment. So it only moves during market hours. So keep that in mind. Yeah. Let's see. Someone is saying, please look at USDJPY. Okay. Okay, so let me just pull up the USDJPY chart. But it still has the same price action like the other JPY pairs. I think it should be closer to 150 yen the last time I checked. Let's just see. Yeah, actually it breached 150. It's actually above 150. Yeah. We should have eyes on 152. Okay. Yeah, we should have eyes on 152. 152, I think, is the level that it's aiming for. Okay. It's aiming for 152. So anytime now, we should see a move up there. Okay. We should see a move up there. And if we get again some kind of guidance from the FOMC that they are not expecting or they are not looking at cutting rates soon, then that is really going to support a stronger dollar, and you'll be able to see that JPY giving you some kind of upside move. So yeah, we should see a move higher on this particular pair and closer to the 152. I think it reached 152 sometime. It was sometime I think in November. Sometime I think in November. Yeah, sometime I think in November. That's when we were close to those levels. So keep an eye. That's when we should see. That's where we are headed to, closer to 152. However, the weaker that the JPY gets, the higher the chances that we are going to see some kind of a stealth intervention. So keep that in mind, guys. Um, Bank of Japan can intervene anytime to strengthen their currency. Okay, so you might see some sharp moves, but closer to that 152 level. That is when you can expect. Yeah. So trading it, wait for retracement, then you get in for a move higher. You trade the retracements, guys. Okay, you trade the retracements. Otherwise, you will end up getting stuck. You'll end up getting stuck in a trade at a top level. So make sure you only trade the retracement. Okay, so as we wind up, the final question. Hello, Robert. How do you tell the time earnings are released? Okay, it's actually Nobert. I think Robert is my other colleague. Yeah. Earnings, you can check the earnings on the calendar. That's the earnings calendar, but NVIDIA earnings are going to be released after the bell. Okay, they are going to be released after the bell. So when does the Asia, London, New York sessions open? So Asia is divided into two. There is Australia, then there is Tokyo, and then you have London, and then you have Frankfurt. So for Australia, they open their markets at about 1 a.m. our time. Tokyo, their markets open at about 3 a.m. And then London opens right now. We don't have daylight saving time, so London is opening at 9 a.m. No, rather 10 a.m. Then Germany session, or rather Frankfurt session, opens at 11 a.m. Then New York opens at 5:30 p.m. Okay, yeah, so that's when the sessions open, and you always make sure that you keep track of that so that you can plan your trading in time. Yeah, so that's really it, guys. Thank you all for joining. We've really had a very strong discussion and turn up today, and I wish you all happy trading. And cheers, guys. Until next time, we'll discuss then. Cheers.